Aloha, everyone, and welcome to our second of 7 Equality High Pride Talks. Today, we have a great show for you. But before we do that, we would like to thank our co-sponsors, Full Life. Full Life empowers people with disabilities live a self-determined and happy lives. Our other co-sponsor is Able to Hawaii Artists. Able to Hawaii Artists is a celebration of abilities in the arts and promoting entrepreneurship in the arts. Thank them both for allowing us to have this presentation. We also want to give a big shout out to Hawaii Island Pride. Before we go on to our show and introduction of our guests, I'd like to introduce you to our co-moderator, Ray Saladares, who's our Equality High Treasurer. Ray?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mark, for the introduction. Again, my name is Ray Saladares, and I am the Treasurer of Equality High, and I do want to offer a few guidelines for our talk today. So first things first is that any questions will be selected on the relevance of the topic and also time constraints to our show today. Secondly, this is a public event that will be filmed, so any participation in this event constitutes express permission and consent for Equality High's unlimited use of the footage as a whole or in part. Third, at our moderator's discretion, any use of disrespectful language, gestures, or actions by any attendees will result in removal of the event and may include all other future Equality High events. And lastly, any statements, opinions expressed by our guests or members do not necessarily reflect the views of Equality High or its members. And then lastly, just a few housekeeping tips. For folks who have questions for our guests today, please type them in the chat box or utilize the chat box. For those of you who are using Facebook Live, go ahead and type those questions and they'll be copied into our Zoom chat box for the moderators to see, as well as our guests. All right, Mark, I'm turning it back over to you so we can introduce our guest speakers tonight.
All right, thank you, Ray. Our guest speakers today for Equality High Close-Up on Queer Lives are Beverly Yates-Tese. She's a queer wife and mother. Beverly is also the president of the Hawaii Island LGBTQ Pride, and she is currently a student at Hilo in the Gender and Women's Studies program. So I'm gonna turn it over to Beverly. Beverly, if you wanna unmute yourself and say hello to everyone.
Hi. Sorry, you guys disappeared?
Oh,
there you are.
Though. Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Beverly. I'm excited to be here.
All right, thank you very much. And so if you're in the audience, can you make sure that you are muted so that way you don't interfere with what's being shown on our screen? Then if you have any questions, as Ray said, please go ahead and type your questions into the chat section. All right, and then our second guest is Kekoa, Kealoha, and he is a medical case manager and PrEP navigator for the Hawaii Island HIV/AIDS Foundation. Kekoa has worked in the HIV care and prevention for over 4 years and is heavily involved in statewide efforts to increase HIV prevention and care services for those most affected. Kekoa's love for HIV care and prevention is driven by his identification in multiple communities, but most notably the Native Hawaiian community and the LGBTQ community. Kekoa is passionate about ending the stigma associated with HIV and other related health issues and is committed to ensuring that the community has equitable access to services and resources that require an improved quality of life. So let me go ahead and find you, Kekoa, on our list here and ask you to unmute yourself and say hello.
Hi, aloha everybody. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and I'm gonna make sure that Beverly and Kekoa, you guys have, when you're ready to talk, just unmute yourself, okay? So I guess the first question we have, and if you're in the audience and if you have any questions for either of them, please post your questions on the chat box. And the first question I have really is, tell us about your journey that brought you to the Big Island. And so who wants to go first?
I'll go ahead and start.
All right, Kekoa.
I like that little nudge. Thanks, Bev. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Kekoa, Kealoha. I actually grew up on this island. So I grew up in North Kohala. I'm a small town person. I live in Kona now. So compared to Kohala, I am in the big city. But yeah, I lived here. I grew up here. I went away to college in Honolulu. And excuse me, I went to high school in Honolulu. I went to college in LA, came home and ended up back on the Big Island just through a strange chain of events, which are with somewhat stressful, but also very good. Overall, I think a very positive outcome. But yeah, that's kind of how I just ended up here, just came home, really.
All right, thanks, Kekoa. How about you, Beverly?
So I actually grew up in Arizona, very tiny town called Bullhead City. Most people don't know where it's at, and they drive through if they're going from Phoenix to Vegas or the other way around. I actually ended up here because I took a trip in the 10th grade. I took a dual enrollment college course for geology, and we did 9-day stint, just walking the volcanoes, being a tourist, doing the thing. And I decided that this is where I wanted to be. And so after I graduated from high school, myself and my now husband came out here, stayed here for a little while, was at UH, moved away because he had joined the military, and we bounced around quite a bit, bunch of stuff in between. But Hawaii's home. So we came home. This is where we wanted to raise our kids.
All right, thanks for that. If you just entered the room, welcome. The program we have today, Equality High, presents Pride Talks. And the topic title is Close Up on Queer Lives. And we have Beverly and we have Kekoa here today, our special guests, talking about their lives here on the Big Island. So Beverly, since we have you on the screen here, tell us about your work right now.
So right now, all the work that I do is volunteer for the community. I'm the current president of Hawai'i Island LGBTQ Pride. We put on year-round events, family-friendly events, that kind of stuff. We have a few main events that we do. So obviously the Pride Parade and Festival is one that happens every year. Then we also have the Hilo Town Haunt, which is during Halloween for kids and families and adults alike to dress up and, bring something to downtown Hilo. And then we also do a toy drive over Christmas, Gifts from Gays, where the last 2 years, the place that we've been donating our toys to is the East Hawaii Family Guidance Center. So most of my work is through LGBTQ and gender issues. I'm also a part-time student and a mom of 2 beautiful boys, and going to school and being a mom and doing all the Pride stuff. Pretty busy all the time. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you do in the community, as well as however you feel comfortable about telling us about your life. But for now, we're going to go over to Kekoa. And Kekoa, I wanted to ask you, how was it growing up here on the Big Island? Because whenever the people who didn't grow up here or born and raised here, we're always curious about how it was, So can you tell us a little bit more about growing up, your path towards where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm I'm turning 35 years old this year. I grew up in a time when the HIV and AIDS epidemic were really was really, you know, coming to a head. I was born in 1985, which is the height of the AIDS epidemic, and so for me, you know, I always grew up kind of with an understanding of what AIDS was, and I grew up kind of shaping my whole idea and my whole concept of what it meant to be a gay man around the AIDS epidemic. And growing up in Hawaii as you know, as a gay kid and knowing from a pretty early age, I would say that it kind of like it messed with me a little bit. And in the mid '90s in Hawaii, I remember that, you know, the same-sex marriage issue suddenly hit the scene. You know, Hawaii was the first place that it had ever even just come up on the map, and so, and it was put to a ballot measure, I think in 1996 or 1997, one of those years. But I remember seeing on the news, you know, people who look like my neighbors, people who look like they could live next door to me, holding signs that say, you know, homosexuality is a sin, and you know, I would say that as far as like the, you know, me as a gay man and growing up gay, that really shaped, you know, my whole perception. But growing up as a kid in Hawaii is nice, you know. Other than that, it's really easy to be a kid here. It's really easy to go outside and play. It's really easy to stay out late and get home and get lickings from your parents. You know, it's just, we live in kind of an ideal place to grow up, you know. But I will say that, like, you know, the early '90s was a really, I think, a really confusing time to grow up as a child, you know, with thoughts that are different, that are not mainstream at the time, and you know, but it was good. I would have to say overall, though, my childhood was good. I still have really tight, close-knit relationships with people in my community. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that. So when we go to Beverly to talk about her personal life, what I'd like you to ponder on is, you know, someone your age, you're 35, you were born in 1985, you said. That was like, you know, I was 19 already, I graduated from high school. And so when we come back to you, I'd like you to sort of talk about how, you know, people in your generation sort of relate to the people who are younger now, you know, because at, you know, at 35, you're not young anymore. And then how do you guys as a generation relate to the older generation? And, you know, give us some insight on your thoughts on those multi-generational things, concerns, successes, topics. So think about that, ponder, and we'll get right back to you. And so thanks again, Kekoa. So Beverly.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about your life now that you've been here for how long?
In total, we've lived in Hawaii 8 years, 2 years prior, and then we just hit 6 years this go.
Very nice. So you said you have two kids.
Yes, yes, I do.
Yeah, tell me about your family life, you know, however you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty open book. So actually myself and I've been with my husband for 14 years now. But he hasn't always been my husband, which is why I actually identify as queer. Sometimes it's confusing for people in the LGBTQ community because I don't always, I guess you could say, out him. But he started his transition about 6 years ago. It'll be 6 years this October. And so when you meet us face to face, most people have no idea. It's kind of weird in a way, you know, after living as a different kind of couple for so long, with our older boy who's 10, he just turned 10, and we have a younger son who is 2. So they're 8 years and a week apart. No idea how we ended up planning that. That was, yeah, not, you know, but they love each other, and it is absolutely fantastic. I would have to say my family dynamic is pretty diverse, considering I'm a person of color. I identify as Mexican, pan, queer. My husband actually identifies as a straight male. Our oldest son is mixed race. He's Black, African American, and our younger boy is Hispanic and white. So, you know, got lots of stuff for our family and everything else that we have going on.
Oh, that's fantastic. So many different kinds of diverse celebrations you can have in your home. So
Yeah,
that's,
it's kind of weird because I actually get the question a lot of like, especially if they don't know when they meet us, they're like, you're such a good ally, and you know, why do you focus so much on LGBTQ issues? And I'm like, oh, truth bomb, this is my life, you know. And I think one of the other reasons that I kind of hyper focus on things too is, well, I mean, I do it a lot for most things, but the reason why I'm really avid into activism work and everything else is due to being on the spectrum, being autistic. And so I can focus all of my energy on the injustice and what's happening in communities, which is why it's so important that I'm honored to be the president of Hawaii Island LGBTQ Pride. You know, it gives me a good outlet to do things for our community.
fantastic. Well, thanks for being so vulnerable. And it's interesting because one of the talks we'll be having in the near future is about disability pride movement. And so maybe if you can check in with us during that time, you can share some of your insight because there are a lot of similarities, and there's so much we can learn from people with disabilities, but that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, thanks again. And I'm gonna go over to Kekoa. Kekoa, are you there?
I am. And I gave it thought, just like you had asked.
Right, go ahead, all yours.
Awesome. Yeah, like, you know, when we talk about, you know, connecting to different generations, the first thing that came to my mind, so no judgment, is Grindr. So, and the reason why, let me explain this, is when my generation, right? Like I said, I'm 35, I'm not young anymore. Thanks for that, by the way. You know, my generation was the first generation to start hooking up online, okay? So I, like all of these people with Grindr, this is fancy stuff, right? So back in my day, you know, we used AOL chat rooms, we used Yahoo chat rooms, we were on gay.com and all things like that, you know? And I bring this up not to talk about, you know, different avenues of hooking up, but to point out that, you know, I'm really fortunate and kind of privileged to come from a generation where I have been connected to the past. You know, I remember using a typewriter when I was a kid, not because I had to, but because it was there. I remember playing the Oregon Trail on the computer. I remember, you know, talking on the phone on a landline and having, you know, getting yelled at by my mom to hang up so she could make a phone call, playing Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and all these things. And so being that in that weird in between where, you know, things went from analog to digital kind of quickly is a pretty interesting generation to be in, I think, and to kind of be an intermediary, I guess. You know, like in my work, I noticed that, you know, the generational difference of people with HIV care is very different. You know, culturally, people are very different, and the way people perceive things, it varies so much, you know. And even like within HIV, I think that the generational differences are pretty incredible, you know. I talk about this a lot in the way I see it in the HIV world. There are three generations of people. There's the people who lived through the epidemic and who lost people that they love and saw kind of the devastation firsthand that happened from it. And then there's the second generation, which is like my generation. You know, we grew up with AIDS always having been a part of life, and it's something that we had to come to terms with, especially if you're being a gay man. You know, what I thought about HIV and AIDS was gay men get AIDS and they die. And that was my whole perspective for a long time. And then there's a newer generation that's coming up now who aren't afraid, you know, aren't afraid the way that I was when I was a kid. And that's great. That's progress. You know, there's a lot more that comes with that. There's, you know, they have their own opportunities and their own challenges, but there's progress being made, you know. And I am a middle child already, so being stuck in the middle is not something new to me. But I find that I am constantly talking to two different types of people if I'm talking to somebody who's older than me or somebody that's younger than me. And I find that that's generally true in the community too. I mean, I don't have to explain generational differences the way we see it in everyday life to you folks. I mean, I think we see it pretty clearly always, you know, with the digital age and the way we receive information and all of that. So, but I have to say it's pretty incredible seeing the advancements that have been made in the LGBT community and also, you know, the HIV movement as well. It's pretty, it's really outstanding.
Okay, thanks for that. I want to ask Beverly a similar question about how you relate generationally, because for Kekoa, you know, the way you see yourself, you know, you're a gay man, so it's not as unknown territory, I would say. But for you, Beverly, can you tell us a little bit more, some insight on how you see the differences in the generations of people that you see? And
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely weird because I grew up in the 90s too. And I feel like the millennial generation always gets a really bad rap. But I also think that people don't take into consideration what we grew up in. You know, like Kekoa was talking about the advancement of technology and how quick that happened. You know, I remember when we got a computer and it was this weird looking thing with just green letters, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, boom, I'm on AOL and there's Yahoo chats and then you're meeting people from all over the place and you're like, oh my goodness, you know? And so it's definitely, I think generationally, there's always going to be a difference between people. And some generations have their strengths and some of them have their weaknesses, you know, like, for example, being in the millennial category for myself, being a woman, being a person of color, being in a queer relationship, having children, still trying to go to school at my age kind of thing, and being on campus, you know, I'm in class with a lot of younger people. And sometimes it's kind of weird to have to describe, you know, my relationships and my inner workings and how I am in the community. You know, because like I said before, a lot of people view me as some straight woman with a husband and kids, and that isn't necessarily the case. And that's why I'm always avid to tell people, you know, don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing. And I think my generation is more open to movement and being involved. And then we have the younger generation that's coming up now where they're speaking out about gun violence and, you know, in high school and having to deal with that. I remember having to go on lockdown and practicing and doing all of that. And luckily, where I grew up, we didn't have anything happen. And so I think depending on how you grew up and what you saw in the media, you know, like I lived through 9/11. That was a huge thing. Lots of wars going on. And then the gay movement, you know, watching, is gay marriage going to unfold in front of us? And will I ever be allowed to marry my partner at the time? It really kind of shapes who you are as a human, and realizing, you know, why it is we fight for equality the way that we do, and why it is that, like myself or Kekoa, we work for organizations and nonprofits and do things to help better our community and the people that we interact with on a daily. You know what I mean? I'm always out there trying to make a difference, or at least I like to think I am.
And you are. Well, thanks for that. Now, Ray, our co-moderator, has been quiet all this time. So Ray, if there's a question from either Facebook Live or from Zoom, feel free to just, bump us out and ask the question.
Yes, actually, we do have a question, and this is directed toward Kekoa. And it reads, Kekoa, you mentioned some advancements made in the LGBT community. What have you seen as the most impactful advancement that shaped your life today?
That's a really good question. So for me, working in HIV care, I tend to focus a lot of my attention on, healthcare and the way, the way we're addressing health disparities. To me, I would say that the most impactful advancement that I've seen is the way that healthcare is delivered, and the level of cultural competency that a lot of healthcare providers are actually making an effort to promote, like gender equity, for example. Small changes where we talk to providers who are not only willing but enthusiastic about gender affirming care and acknowledging people based on how they identify. And I know that this doesn't seem like a big deal to a lot of people, especially if they are not familiar with the fight for trans justice. But for someone to just be acknowledged at the most basic level, it makes a huge difference in shaping health outcomes. And for me, being able to find a doctor who I can talk to about issues that relate to my health as a gay man make a world of difference. It's still a challenge, on this island, but being able to find a doctor who I was open to learning about PrEP, which if folks know about PrEP, right, you have to get it prescribed. I spent time shopping for a doctor who not only wasn't afraid to write the prescription for it, but was willing to listen to what I had to say about it. So to me, the biggest advancements is healthcare delivery, because that's where the LGBT community, I think, is hurting the most.
Thank you for that. So when I was having a pre-event meeting with Bev and Kekoa, I said, once we get started and once you get comfortable and we start getting things going, the hour's gonna go by so quickly, and already we're halfway through. So if you just joined us today, I just wanna welcome you to Equality High, number 2 of 7 1-hour talk series. The title we have today for Pride Talks is Close Up on Queer Lives. And we have Beverly, Yates-Tese, and Kekoa Kealoha. And we've been talking to them for the last 30 minutes. So if you missed the first half of our program and you would like to see the entire program, we will be doing some editing, doing some branding, of course, and then be able to rebroadcast this at a date sooner, hopefully, than later, onto our Equality High Facebook page. So moving forward, are there any statements or anything that Beverly or Kekoa you'd like to ask each other?
Actually, yeah. I am interested in hearing from Beverly kind of what it was like navigating the transition with your husband. I know that this can be kind of a challenging discussion, but I'm always curious to know what it's, that experience.
Right, so that's actually a very good question, because a lot of the times when you hear about couples that are in relationships and then one of the people in the relationship decides to transition, it's actually been seen a lot where the couple actually breaks up, something happens, they're not okay with it, kind of thing. So that's why I find myself, I feel like I'm a very fluid person, because growing up, I first came out to my best friend in junior high, and I was like, I don't know what this is called, but I think I like girls. And then she was like, me too, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And then as I grew up into high school, and my family found out, and where I come from, it was definitely not okay. And then I met my then girlfriend my senior year at the time, And so we were together my senior year, and then after we moved out here to Hawaii together. And then this is where the transition's weird, because when I talk about him, when I talk about the past tense, it's she, her, that kind of thing. So try and follow. I hope this isn't confusing. She joined the military, went off, boot camp, did the whole thing. I moved back to help take care of my family. And after the military, we had our oldest son. And I noticed that something was off. Like, I noticed there was always something weird. And being the person that I am, who loves to research stuff, I started looking into, lesbian relationships and what could be the problem, having a very more masculine girlfriend and trying to help, that kind of stuff, depression, whatever, family issues, that stuff. And I came across this group where we lived in Reno, Nevada, and they were doing a talk on trans mental health. And then I got involved in a group, and I showed up to this group, and I actually invited her to come with me, and it didn't go well. So I brought it up. I was actually the one who was like, maybe there's something more going on that we need to discuss and go over. And so it was actually years of pushback of that. And then we were in Wyoming, very conservative area in Wyoming. That was so much fun. Did make some best friends there, though. Nothing against the people. They were actually pretty great. And Cohen finally came out to me and was like, I think you were right. And then the discussion to move back home to Hawaii, where we can call home, was very real and on the table. And so we moved out here 6 years ago, and Cohen started working, got the insurance, and we immediately went into hormones. And at the beginning of the transition, it was actually very difficult for me. I had a hard time, and I'm not afraid to admit it because we've talked about it. And I would have to say the weirdest point for me was actually once he started passing and people started seeing us as this straight couple, that was the hardest thing for me personally to have to handle, because I fought so long doing pride and queer projects and everything to be noticed and to make, at the time, just the LGB, it wasn't really a trans thing that I was too aware of, so prevalent in my life, that once we got to that point of people viewing us as this regular heterosexual normal couple, that was a hard one. It was a hard one, and I still get it to this day on campus, or people meeting me, or like I said before with why do you do pride? Why is it such a big deal? And so the transition process, it's always a process. Like even right now, we're trying to get insurance in to do top surgeries and stuff. And it's a roller coaster, like you said, with healthcare and finding the right places, because there's no places that we've found that'll do it here on the island that accepts insurance. We're looking at having to go to the mainland. And so trans healthcare is so difficult, being able to find a doctor that's willing to talk. And so we're still kind of in the middle of transition. We're not done yet. And it's definitely a discussion, especially having to talk to our older son about it, he's such a smart kid. So I'm very thankful for that.
All right, Ray.
I actually, I'm sorry, Ray, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, Beverly.
Kekoa, I actually have a question for you, because you said you were on Oahu for a little while. Do you find that the gay community, the LGBTQ community, is much different on Oahu as compared to the Big Island? Because my experience from the LGBTQ community on the mainland to the community that I found here on the Big Island is much different. I feel like we're very tight-knit here. You know what I mean? And we're pretty open. So how was that like on Oahu? I mean, Oahu's big city, it scares me, so.
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of time on Oahu. I actually hit the scene on Oahu before I ever hit the scene on the Big Island. But it is very tight knit, you know, and even between Oahu and here, we see a lot of mobility between the two, between the islands, you know. Like a lot of the performers will come here from Oahu, or people from here will travel there, compete in pageants, you know, in the drag community. And I find that, you know, there's a lot of participation in different events that are happening, whether it's like pride events or whether it's like the AIDS walk. There happens to be some fluidity, and I find that on Oahu, it's just bigger. It's to me, it's the same thing. It's just bigger. Yeah, and you know, I've got a lot of friends there, and they're very close to me. Yeah, I don't know. It's just about the same, but you know, it's in a city, so the notable differences of being in the city, I think, versus, you know, being a city queen versus being a country queen. And I'm a country queen, but I'm also somewhat a city queen, so it's okay.
All right. So Ray, is there a question?
Yes, we do. And I believe this is not directed at any particular speaker, but the question is, what is the hope and impact that you would like to impart on future local generations?
All right. Well, let's start with who would like to go first to answer that question? Now, that's a nice pageant
All right.
question. Huh?
All right, I can go first. So part of what we do in Hawaii Island LGBTQ Pride is we've actually started reaching out to our youth. We got our foot in the door with the HSTA, the Hawaii State Teacher Association, so that we can help educate the teachers and the faculty and staff on queer issues, pronouns, you know, family dynamics, how to make it okay. You know, we put together resources for them, but that's just the teacher side of it. Now, the other thing that we're trying to really focus on and start becoming more, I guess, involved would be finding the GSAs. And then after the HSTA, once we made contact with all the GSA stuff, the COVID hit and then the schools closed. And so they're not having any GSAs right now. But we actually do have a youth group that meets through us with another person that they were meeting once a month. And I believe the age range was 12 through 18. I could be incorrect, so don't quote me on that exactly. But what we're trying to do as a committee, as a community, is to make sure that they have some positive role models to look at, especially because my group, the Pride group, we're very diverse and we come from all different walks of life. You know, like I'm a person of color. We have gay men, people of different ethnic backgrounds, people from different parts in the United States, people who've traveled all over, older, younger, in between, trans people, the whole thing. And so we're trying to make sure that they see us in the community. They see that we're out there doing the work, that we're being active with them, and that we are there for them. And so I just want to make sure that they have what I didn't have, or what some of my other committee members didn't have. And that's a strong base that they can go to lean on. And we just hope that they know that it's going to be okay. And even if they're not out right now, or if they're not feeling safe, we support you anyways. If there's any young people watching right now, we love you, all of us. Equality Hawaii, every single one of us here are here for you guys. And if there's anything that we can pass on to you, is that please reach out, because we want to give you the world so that you guys can continue to make it better for who will be the young generation for you when you guys are our age. So just hope, really, you know.
Thank you, Bev. That was very inspirational. So Kekoa, do you want to share your answer?
Absolutely. So I will start this by saying 5 years ago today, I was homeless. And I didn't talk about this earlier, but I am an addict in recovery. Next month, I will have 5 years clean and sober, which is exciting. And the reason I bring that up is because, you know, our community, we go through a lot of trauma. You know, we experience a lot of difficult things, you know, and that looks different for everybody. I'm a person who, you know, the way I handled my trauma and the way I handled, you know, coming to terms with who I am, you know, I did it with drugs and I did it with alcohol and I completely overdid it, you know. But I'm here to tell you that, you know, things like this, even though they disproportionately impact our community, they don't have to define our lives, you know. Things happen and there are so many different types of people in our community and we're at so many different levels of different life experiences that, you know, we need each other. You know, and I remember someone telling me when I was struggling to get clean at first, and she said, hang on, because I know that you're special. And I don't know that I'm special, but I know that I was able to make something productive out of my life, you know? And I firmly believe that we go through challenges and that we go through difficult situations because we need those experiences to do something better for the people who come after us. And I believe that all of us who are involved in any way, you know, even if what you do as a gay person is march in a parade and carry a flag, that is purposeful and it is meaningful, you know, and we need you at whatever level you're at, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, we need you. And we can't do this and we can't progress without you. So no matter what you're doing, I love you and I see you and I want you here on my team.
Well, thank you both. That was very chicken skin. We really appreciate the message of inspiration that you're both sharing with us. If you're joining us late, welcome. This is 2 of 7 1-hour Pride Talks for Equality High. And the topic conversation today is Close Up on Queer Lives. If you're interested in what we're doing and you'd like to join us on Friday, this coming Friday, 5 to 6, we are going to be featuring artists, queer artists and their work. So we're going to move on. We have about 15 more minutes. So we're just going to leave it open for anyone who has questions. And also if Beverly and Kekoa, if you guys have any more insight to impart, just let us know.
I do want to mention how happy and proud I am of Beverly and you folks being able to get in with the Hawaii State Teachers Association, because let me tell you, trying to work with the Department of Education is damn near impossible. You know, oh my God, we try to get into schools to teach children about sexual health and about HIV and about STDs and things like that. And the pushback we get is never from teachers, it's always from the Department of Education. And for some reason, they never, ever, ever want to talk to the Department of Health, which is crazy to me because they're both state departments, you know? In my head, they should be working together, but maybe that's just me, I don't know. But I wanted to know how you were able to get in with the Teachers Association. Did you have like an advocate on the inside that helped out with that?
So yeah, actually, like I was saying, my committee is very diverse. So we actually do have a lot of volunteers that are teachers and actually professors at the university at UH. And so it just took a lot of persistence and emails and phone calls and please, we promise this is going to make a difference. And I know it's, you know, it's a hard, for some people it's a hard topic, which is so strange because a lot of people say, you know, living in Hawaii is wonderful, it's so open, it's so fantastic, which yes, I agree, obviously, which is why we live here, but a lot of the times it is quite socially conservative, which is something that I talk with friends about all the time. And it was, you know, HSTA, I don't know. They bridged the gap and decided that, yeah, you know, it was time for them to get on board and support the kids in schools. But I don't know. It was a lot of hard work. We definitely have some absolutely amazing people on the committee that are not afraid to do the legwork, like I said, and get out there and make phone calls and send emails. You know, like with the HSTA, the Teacher Association, I think initially we had been reaching out to them, and then finally they reached out back and said, we would love to have you. And we're very thankful for it. And now that we have gain their trust to allow us to do more talks, we're definitely going to be working with them closely as we continue. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Beverly. Since we've talked about your organization, Kekoa, tell us about the organization that you work for. This is a good time for you to, promote your organization.
Oh, sure. So I work for the Hawaii Island HIV/AIDS Foundation. We also refer to it as HIHAF. We are the AIDS service organization for the County of Hawaii, and we have 2 offices, one in Kona and one in Hilo. I am based in Kona. Our agency provides care services to people living with HIV. So we help people access like housing programs, food, different types of assistance with drugs, cost of healthcare, and things like that. We navigate a lot of different situations. Sometimes it blows my mind how diverse like the different circumstances that exist here are. And that's for our care side. We also do prevention work because our mission is, to help people who are living with HIV to maximize their quality of life, but also to prevent the spread of HIV. And so we have our prevention department, which does HIV testing. We're doing STD testing, hepatitis testing. We do all sorts of counseling for risk reduction. We also offer PrEP in-house, which is great and still somewhat new. We actually have a new sexual health clinic, which is starting. And any of you who know Kyle Furman from Bay Clinic, he's coming on over to HIHAF, and we're super excited about that because he's amazing. But we're growing, and we're doing a lot more diverse things than we used to do, because we used to be primarily focused on HIV. But in order for us to sustain our programs, we have to diversify our services, because HIV funding just diminishes year after year. The need is still there, it just diminishes. And right now, not to get too political about it, but the way that funding from the federal government currently under this administration, the way it pans out, really puts people in strained positions, I should say. It makes vulnerable people more vulnerable, and it disproportionately impacts communities of color, rural communities, and things like that. So we do pretty good. We have a lot more programs now which help us out, but we continue to advocate for our clients and for our people who are either living with HIV or people who are at risk for getting HIV. I often refer to myself as the safer sexpert because that's a little bit fun. Yeah, that's pretty much what we do in a nutshell. I know we care for about 300 people on the island. We provide client services to about 300 people island-wide, all across the island. Yeah, and as you folks know, the HIV epidemic disproportionately impacts the LGBT community, particularly men who have sex with men and trans women. That's not to say, also trans men are also underrepresented in any kind of efforts that go out for HIV. But yeah, it's all about achieving health equity, and addressing the different disparities that exist within the community. And so one of the things that whenever I do outreach and I'm talking about HIV, and in our community, as a Hawaiian, the one thing that I always try to drive home is that Native Hawaiians have the highest rate of late-stage HIV diagnosis in the country. So if someone is Hawaiian and they're diagnosed with HIV, they're much more likely to be diagnosed with AIDS than anybody else, you know. And so recently what we're seeing, you know, I don't know if any of you saw the statement that came out about racism as a public health issue. So that is extremely pronounced in the HIV world. And just to throw out some stats so people kind of get an understanding, you know, a Black man who has sex with men, his chances of getting HIV in his lifetime are 1 out of 2. For a Latino, it is 1 out of 4. For a white man, it is 1 out of 11. So when we look at those numbers and who needs services and who needs to be prioritized when it comes to healthcare and HIV, you know, it's really easy for us to look at it in, you know, these different social indicators. And unfortunately, race is a pretty significant indicator when it comes to HIV. So, yeah.
Well, thanks, Kekoa, for all that information. I just want you to know that when I moved here in 2003, my very first nonprofit work was with BIAP, and I was the condom boy at Kahena for a little bit, and so that's my introduction to the community here.
Oh, BIAP, that's old school. That's a merger. I mean, so yeah, HIHAP is a merger of the Big Island AIDS Project and the West Hawaii AIDS Foundation. So yeah.
Okay, thanks again for all the information. Sorry about that, I muted myself. We have we're going to wind down here for today's program. We have one question, and then before I forget, because I'm old now in my memory, I just want to ask Bev to make sure that she maybe gives us some information about her hopes and dreams for the Hawaii Island Pride, what she sees this organization in 5 years, you know. So the question is, Ray?
Okay, so the question, this comes from Facebook. How is being Q different from LGBT?
And who wants to answer that?
Keikoa, do you want to answer it or no? No, okay. I actually identify as queer. Keikoa and I talked earlier, he identifies as gay. So speaking from my own personal experience and other queer people that I know, that are friends of mine now, the term queer is definitely a lot different than anything else. It's more of an umbrella term. Queer was actually used as a derogatory term for, as most of you know, a very, very, very long time. I even grew up hearing it, you know, like the queers are gross or whatever have you. And so I actually had a really hard time embracing it for myself. But considering all of the transitions I have gone through in my life with, you know, growing up, being young and having to date boys in junior high, high school kind of thing, and then meeting girls and being like, no, this is okay. And then once I met now my husband, we've gone through a transition. I feel a lot more comfortable with identifying as a queer person, just because it doesn't, and this is for no offense to anyone, it doesn't put me in a box. It keeps me open in the movement, in what I'm doing, in accepting myself, and kind of taking back that really negative word that I grew up with for most of my life, really. But I think, yeah, I don't know. Some people are still not okay with using the term queer, and to each their own. But for me, I try and shout it from the rooftops. Sometimes my family is kind of like, you know, you're a little outspoken with that one, don't you think? But hey, what can you do, right?
Thanks, Beverly. So what do you see for your organization? And, you know, it's a very big question. Like, what do you see for the organization in the next 5 years or so?
Right. So that's actually a really tough question. I was actually joking around with my husband, Cohen, the other day, because he was saying 5 years ago, when everyone's like, in 5 years, I'm going to be here, nobody would have thought that everyone would be locked in their rooms at home. You know what I mean? So that's definitely a tough one. But I would have to say we have some big news. We are actually now officially our own nonprofit. All the paperwork came through, you know, everything else. We're not underneath the Legacy Foundation anymore, even though they are amazing. Shout out to them for being so helpful and helping push us to where we are today. But I would have to say, I just see us kind of keeping on with what we're doing. Like I always say, my committee we're doers. Man, if anyone wants to get involved and do something, you hit us up on Facebook, or me personally, if you know me, or any of us, because we really like to get out into the community. So I would definitely have to say, you know, in 5 years' time, we would hope to just still be educating people in all aspects of LGBTQ things, resources, supporting other minority groups and people, and just making a difference for our younger kids. For example, my children, when they grow up, you know, so that they, not a weird thing anymore, you know?
All right, thanks for that, Bev. Do we have any other questions before we start closing up on our program here? So while we wait for more questions, I would like to say that I want to thank everyone for joining our event today. It was so enlightening and wonderful and educational, and I appreciate having two fabulous, unique people sharing your lives and being vulnerable and sharing resources and information about the things that you do in the community. I want to thank our co-sponsors, Full Life, which is a nonprofit that assists people with disabilities live self-determined full lives, and also Able to Hawaii Artists, another co-sponsor of ours. And Able to Hawaii Artists has an annual art festival at the Prince Kuhio Plaza, and typically they are the largest celebration of the ADA in the state, which happens in July. But because of the time that we're in, it's been rescheduled to October. So it'll be on 10/10/20, October 10, 2020. And it'll be a celebration of Employment Disability Awareness Month. So Able to Hawaii Artists celebrate the spectrum of abilities and creativity while promoting entrepreneurship in the arts. I also want to give a shout out to Bev. Congratulations to the Hawaii Island Pride for getting your nonprofit. I'm sure it was a process, and I'm glad you guys made it through the other side of the door. Congratulations, it's a big feat. We want to thank Kekoa and his presentation and insight on services about the high half and sharing information about your life. And we want to thank everyone who joined us today. It's a few minutes before that hour. And I guess the last thing I'd like to say is, because I didn't read you our vision mission statement at the beginning of our program, is that Equality High envisions a thriving and empowering culture that proactively engages in creating an inclusive and diverse queer community through aloha, leadership, resources, services, and education. Ray, is there anything you'd like to say before we close this successful event?
I just wanted to say again, thank you to our speakers today. It was very engaging and very inspiring. You know, it's nice to see that we have a very inclusive community with so much talent and so much to offer those who are coming up behind us. And it's amazing to see such a venue like this, which I've never seen growing up, and I grew up here. So this whole new digital world is just amazing to get the word out from all fractions of our community. So again, thank you so much for participating, and kudos to both Kekoa and Beverly for participating today.
All right, thank you, everyone, and Ray. So again, you've been enjoying and watching and learning from Equality High's 7 one-hour series of Pride Talks, and today's topic was Close Up on Queer Lives. Join us for the entire month of June, every Wednesday and Friday from 5 to 6 for a variety of fascinating, educational, insightful topics that'll give you chicken skin and inspire you for the entire year of being proud of our community and yourself. This Friday, the topic is queer artists and their work. We will be interviewing two amazing artists to talk about their work, their life, and what they hope to do for the future in the art and our community. Thank you again for joining us this evening. Everyone have a safe, wonderful Aloha Wednesday. Aloha, everyone. Take care.
Aloha, thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. And remember, the first Pride was a riot.
Yes.
Yo.